single man, my dear, a single man with 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls.
How so? How can it affect them?
Mr. Bennet, how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I'm thinking of his marrying one of them.
Oh, is that his design in coming here?
Design? Nonsense. How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes.
I see no occasion for that.
But my dear, you must. Only think what a match it will be for one of the girls. Indeed, you must go, for it will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not.
You are over-scrupulous, surely. I will write to Mr. Bingley and assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls, though I must throw in a good word for my Lizzie.
I desire you will do no such thing. My Lizzie is not half so handsome as Jane, nor half so good-humoured as Lydia, but you're always giving her the preference.
Oh, well, they have none of them much to recommend them. They are all silly and ignorant like other girls.
Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You delight in vexing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves.
You mistake me, my dear. I have a great respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these 20 years at least. Now then, girls, how are you all this fine morning?
Very well, Father.
I am delighted to hear it, Jane. That is a nice hat, Lizzie. I hope Mr. Bingley will like it.
We are not in a way to know what Mr. Bingley will like, since you will not visit him.
But you forget, Mamma. We shall meet him at the next ball.
Oh, do stop coughing so, Mary, for heaven's sake. Have a little compassion for my poor nerves. You tear them to pieces.
Mary has no discretion in her coughs. She times them ill.
I do not cough for my own amusement.
When is your next ball to be, Kitty?
In 3 days' time, the assembly room in Merit.
Aye, so it is, which gives us no time at all to become acquainted with Mr. Bingley.
It certainly is a short time. One cannot get to know what a man really is in just a few days. What say you, Mary? For you are a young lady of deep reflection, I know, and read many books.
Well...
While Mary is adjusting her ideas, let us return to Mr. Bingley.
Oh, I am sick of Mr. Bingley.
I am sorry to hear that. Had I known as much this morning, I certainly would not have gone to call upon him. It is very unlucky, but as I have actually paid the visit, we cannot escape the acquaintance now.
Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, how good of you. And what a good joke, too, that you should have gone this morning and not said a word about it until now.
Now, Mary, I believe you may cough as much as you choose.
What an excellent father you have, girls. I do not know how you will ever thank him for his kindness. Now, we must have you all looking well for this ball. Lydia, my love, though you are the youngest, I am sure Mr. Bingley will dance with you.
Oh, I am not afraid of that. For, though I am the youngest, I am the best dancer.
Charlotte, how good to see you. We have all been speculating as to the identity of our new neighbour. Could that be him there?
No, that's his friend Mr. Darcy. Mr. Bingley is the other gentleman. The lady is Mr. Bingley's sister. We have it on good authority that Mr. Darcy has a fine estate in Derbyshire and 10,000 a year.
Indeed.
Yeah, Mr. Darcy does not seem as amiable as his friend. Oh, Mr. Bingley is very willing to dance and eager to become acquainted with all. Mr. Darcy has not yet spoken to anyone outside his party.
That might yet change. Look, Mr. Bingley approaches.
Lady Lucas, Miss Lucas, can I beg to be introduced to your friends?
But of course, Mr. Bingley, let me introduce to you Mrs. Bennet, Miss Bennet, and the Mrs. Elizabeth and Mary Bennet.
It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Might I ask, is Miss Bennet engaged for the next dance?
I am not engaged, sir.
Darcy, I must have you dance. I do hate to see you standing about yourself in this stupid manner.
Certainly not. At an assembly such as this, it would be insupportable.
Upon my honour, I have never seen so many pleasant girls in my life, and several of them are uncommonly pretty.
You're about to dance with the only handsome girl in the room.
She is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld. But there is one of her sisters standing just behind you who is very pretty, and I dare say very agreeable. Do let me ask my partner to introduce you.
He is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. Bingley, I'm in no humour at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. You'd better return to your partner and enjoy her smiles, for you're wasting your time with me.
I believe I can guess your thoughts.
I should imagine not.
You are thinking how intolerable it would be to pass many evenings in such society. And indeed, I am quite of your opinion.
As it happens, my mind was more agreeably engaged. I was meditating on the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow.
Indeed. And may one inquire which lady has the credit of inspiring such reflections?
Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet! I'm all astonishment. Well, and pray, when am I to wish you joy?
That is exactly the question I expected you to ask.
Nay, if you are serious, I shall consider the matter as absolutely settled. You will have quite the mother-in-law, indeed. And of course you will always be at Pemberley with you.
Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, we have had a most delightful evening. Jane was so admired. Mr. Bingley thought her quite beautiful and danced with her twice. Only think of that, my dear. And she was the only creature in the room that he asked a second time. They danced the first dance together, and then the second dance he danced with Lizzie, and the third he danced with Charlotte Elizabeth, and then the
If
fourth
he
dance
had had any compassion for me, he would not have danced half so much. For God's sake, say no more of his partners. Oh, that he had sprained his ankle in the first dance.
Oh, my dear, I'm quite delighted with him. And his sister is charming. So elegantly dressed. Why, I dare say the lace on Miss Bingley's gown comes
I
all the way.
do not wish to hear descriptions of finery, Mrs. Bennet.
However, his friend, I would wish Mr. Darcy miles away, 10,000 a year or no. He refused to dance with Lizzie, you know, flatly refused.
Indeed, and why was my Lizzie not to his fancy?
Father, it hardly matters. I certainly do
I
not
can assure you that Lizzie does not lose much by not suiting his fancy, for he is a most horrid, disagreeable man. Not handsome enough to dance with, indeed. Another time, Lizzie, I would not dance with him, even if he does ask you.
I believe, Mum, I may safely promise you never to dance with Mr. Darcy.
Well, his pride perhaps is understandable. One cannot wonder that a prosperous young man, family, fortune, and everything in his favour should think highly of himself.
That is true. And I could easily forgive his pride had he not mortified mine.
Pride is a very common failing, I believe. By all that I have ever read, I am certain that human nature is particularly prone to it.
Indeed, Mary. Well put. Time for bed, I think.
Well, Jane, and what did you think of our new neighbour? He is just what a young one ought to be. sensible, good-humoured, lively, and I never saw such happy manners. And he is also handsome, which a young man ought likewise to be if he possibly can. I was very much fluttered by him asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment. Did you not? I did, for he could not help seeing that you were 5 times as pretty as any other woman in the room. He certainly is very agreeable, and I give you leave to like him. You have certainly liked many a stupider person. Dear Lizzie. Jane, you are a great deal too apt, to like people in general. You never see fault in anyone, and I never heard you speak ill of a human being in your life. I would not wish to be hasty in censoring anyone, but I always speak what I think. I know you do, and it is that which makes the wonder. With your good sense, to be so honestly blind to the follies and nonsense of others is quite extraordinary. And so you like his sister too, do you? Her manners are not equal to his. Perhaps not at first, but she is very pleasing when you converse with her. Miss Bingley used to live with her brother at Netherfield, and I am sure that you will find her a most agreeable neighbour. Well, we shall see. Captain Denny looked very dashing at the ball.
Ah, but all men look fine in regimentals.
From all I can gather by your manner of talking, you must be 2 of the silliest girls in the country.
I'm astonished, my dear, that you should be so ready to find your own children silly.
If my children are silly, I must hope always to be sensible of them.
Yes, but as it happens, they're all of them very clever.
That is the only thing, I flatter myself, upon which you and I do not agree. I must so far differ from you as to find our 2 youngest daughters uncommonly foolish.
Miss Bennet, this just came for you from Netherfield.
Oh, Jane, what does it say? Who is it from? Oh, is it from Mr. Bingley? What is it about? What is it? Oh, make haste and tell us, my love, make haste.
It is from Miss Bingley.
Oh. My dear friend, kindly come and dine with me today. My brother and Mr. Darcy are to dine with the officers. Oh, that is unlucky. Still, you must go and make the best of it.
Dining with the officers. I wonder Denny did not tell us of that.
May I take the carriage, Father?
No, you had better go on horseback, for it seems likely to rain, and then you will have to stay the night.
I had much rather go in the carriage.
But, my dear, I'm sure the horses cannot be spared for the carriage. They are wanted on the farm, Mr. Bennet, are they not?
They are wanted much more often than I can get them.
Well, then, today you will have them, and we will all be pleased. Go on, Jane, indeed.
My dearest Lizzie, I find myself very unwell this morning, which is to be imputed to my getting wet through yesterday in the rain. My dear friends will not hear of me leaving Netherfield until I am better. But do not be alarmed. Excepting a sore throat and a headache, there is not much the matter with me.
Well, my dear, if Jane should die, it would be a comfort to know that it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley and under your orders.
Oh, I'm not afraid of her dying. People do not die of little trifling colds. She will be very well taken care of.
I think I must see Jane. I will walk to Netherfield immediately.
What, walk all that way in all this dirt? You will not be fit to be seen when you get there.
I shall be fit to see Jane, which is all I want.
Is this a hint to me, Lizzie, to send for the carriage?
No, indeed, Father, I do not wish to avoid the walk. It is only 3 miles, and I shall be back by dinner.
I admire your benevolence, but in my opinion, exertion should be in proportion to what is required.
We will go as far as Meryton with you, Lizzie.
Aye, indeed. Perhaps if we make haste, we will see something of Denny before he goes to town.
Lydia,
Careful.
Well, we must allow Eliza Bennet to be an excellent walker, if nothing else. I shall never forget her appearance this morning. She really looked almost wild. Very nonsensical. Why must she be scampering about the countryside because her sister has a cold?
Your picture may be very exact, Caroline, but I thought Miss Elizabeth Bennet looked remarkably well. Her dirty petticoat quite escaped my notice.
You observed it, Mr. Darcy, I'm sure. I'm inclined to think you would not wish to see your sister make such an exhibition of herself.
Certainly not.
To walk 3 or 4 miles, or whatever it is, above her ankles in dirt, and alone, quite alone. Whatever could she mean by it? It seems to me to show an abominable sort of conceited independence. Most country town indifference to decorum.
It shows an affection for her sister that is very pleasing.
I'm afraid, Mr. Darcy, that this adventure has rather affected your admiration of her fine eyes.
Not at all. They're brightened by the exercise.
I have an excessive regard for Jane Bennet. She's a very sweet girl, and I wish with all my heart she were well settled. But with such a father and mother, and such low connections, I'm afraid there is no chance of it.
I think I've heard you say their uncle is an attorney in Meryton.
Yes, and they have another, who lives somewhere near Cheapside.
If they had uncles enough to fill all Cheapside, it would not make them one jot less agreeable to me.
But it must very materially lessen their chances of marrying men of any consequence in the world, Bingley.
Ah, Miss Bennet.
How was your sister this evening? I trust you found her as well as can be.
Better than I feared, sir, but still very ill. She is sleeping now.
Well, I do hope you will stay here with us in Netherfield until she is better. I am certain she can have no better nurse. Please do sit with us. Would you like to read, or perhaps we could start a card game?
Thank you, a book would suit me perfectly.
How delighted Miss Darcy will be to receive such a letter. You write uncommonly fast.
You are mistaken. I write rather slowly.
Is Miss Darcy much grown since the spring? Is she as tall as I am?
She's about Miss Elizabeth Bennet's height, or rather taller.
How I long to see her again. Such a countenance, such manners, and so extremely accomplished for her age. The performance on the pianoforte is exquisite.
It is amazing to me how young ladies can find the patience to be so very accomplished, as they all are. Indeed, I'm certain I've never had a young lady spoken of for the first time without being informed that she was very accomplished.
Words applied to many a woman who does not deserve it. I cannot boast of knowing more than half a dozen women in the whole range of my acquaintance that are truly accomplished.
Nor I, I'm sure.
Then you must comprehend a great deal in your idea of an accomplished woman.
Yes, I do.
Oh, certainly. A truly accomplished woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages. And besides all this, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, in the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, or the word will be but half deserved.
And to all this she must add something yet more substantial, in the improvement of her mind by extensive reading.
I am no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I rather wonder at your knowing any.
Are you so severe upon your own sex?
I never saw such a woman. I never saw such capacity and taste and application and elegance as you describe.
How many letters you must have occasion to write in the course of a year, Mr. Darcy? Letters of business, too. How odious I should think them.
It is fortunate, then, that it falls to my lot instead of yours.
Pray tell your sister that I long to see her.
I've already told her so once.
Pray tell her that I'm quite in raptures with her beautiful little design for a table.
Give me leave to defer your raptures till I write again. At present I have not room to do them justice.
By the by, Charles, are you really serious about holding a ball at Netherfield? I would advise you consult the wishes of the present party before proceeding further. I believe there are some of us to whom a ball would be rather a punishment than a pleasure.
If you mean Darcy, he may go to bed before it begins if he chooses. As for the ball, it is quite a settled thing.
Miss Eliza, may I persuade you to follow my example and take a turn about the room? I assure you it is quite refreshing after sitting so long in one attitude. May I persuade you to join us, Mr. Darcy?
I can imagine only 2 motives for you choosing to walk together, both of which I should interfere with.
Why, whatever can you mean? Can you understand him, Miss Bennet?
Not at all. But depend upon it, he means to be severe on us. and the surest way of disappointing him will be to ask nothing about it.
Nay, I insist on an explanation.
I have not the smallest objection to explaining myself. You either choose this method of passing the evening because you're in each other's confidence and have secret affairs to discuss, or because you're aware your figures appear to the greatest advantage when walking. If the first, I'd be completely in your way. If the second, I can admire you much better from my present position.
Oh, shocking reply! I've never heard anything so abominable. How shall we punish him for such a speech?
There is nothing so easy if one has but the inclination. Tease him. Laugh at him.
Laugh at Mr. Darcy? No, it cannot be done.
Mr. Darcy is not to be laughed at. That is an uncommon advantage. And uncommon I hope it will continue, for I daily love a laugh.
Miss Bingley gives me more credit than can be possible. The best of men may be rendered ridiculous by a person whose first object in life is a joke.
There certainly are such people, but I hope I am not one of them. I hope I shall never ridicule what is wise and good. Follies and nonsense do amuse me, but these, I suppose, are precisely what you are without.
Perhaps that is not possible for anyone. To have strived to avoid those weaknesses which often expose a strong understanding to ridicule.
Such as vanity and pride, perhaps.
Yes, vanity is a weakness indeed. Pride. Where there is real superiority of mind, pride will always be under good regulation.
Your examination of Mr. Darcy is over, I presume. Pray, what is the result?
I am perfectly convinced by it that Mr. Darcy has no defect. He owns it himself without disguise.
I have faults enough. They're not, I hope, of understanding. My temper I dare not vouch for. It might perhaps be called resentful. My good opinion once lost is lost forever.
It is a failing indeed, and I really cannot laugh at it.
Miss Bennet, there is, I believe, in every disposition a natural defect to some particular evil.
And your defect is to hate everybody.
Yours is to wilfully misunderstand them.
Do let us have a little music. Miss Bennet, may I persuade you to delight us?
Oh, I should much rather hear you, I do assure you.
I am glad to be home, Lizzie. I could not help but feel badly about how much trouble I must have caused Mr. Bingley and Caroline by my illness.
I believe Mr. Bingley would gladly have had twice as much trouble if it had meant you staying under his roof for a longer time. You should rather feel sorry for the trouble you caused me, being forced to spend so many evenings with Mr. Darcy and Miss Bingley. Not even your Mr. Bingley's company could compensate me for that.
He is not my Mr. Bingley, Lizzie.
Not yet.
I hope, my dear, that you have ordered a good dinner today, for I have every reason to expect an addition to our family party.
What do you mean, my dear? Oh, I know. Mr. Bingley, I am sure. Oh, but how unlucky. There's not a bit of fish to be had today. I must speak to him this minute.
It is not Mr. Bingley. It is a person who I never saw before in the whole course of my life. About a month ago, I received this letter. About a fortnight ago, I answered it, for I believe it needed early attention. It is from my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, when I am dead, may turn you all out of this house as soon as he pleases.
Oh, my dear, I cannot bear to hear that odious man mentioned. I do think it is the hardest thing in the world that your estate be entailed away from your own children just because they are not male.
It certainly is a most iniquitous affair, and nothing can clear Mr. Collins from the guilt of inheriting Longbourn. But if you will listen to his letter, I think you may be a little softened by his manner of expressing himself.
No, that I am sure I shall not.
Dear Sir, having had the misfortune to lose my late honoured father, I have frequently wished to heal the breach between our two families. Having received ordination, I have been so fortunate as to be distinguished by the patronage of the Right Honourable Lady Catherine de Bourgh, whose bounty and beneficence have preferred me to a valuable living at the rectory on her estate. As a clergyman, I feel it is my duty to promote and establish the blessing of peace in all families within my influence, and I trust that you will not reject the offered olive branch. Moreover, I cannot be otherwise than deeply concerned at my being the means of injuring your most amiable daughters, and I can assure you of my readiness to make them every possible amends. If you have no objection to receiving me, I propose myself the satisfaction of waiting on you and your family on Monday by 4 o'clock, and shall likely trespass upon your hospitality until the Saturday following. I remain, dear sir, your well-wisher and friend, William Collins.
We may therefore expect this peacemaking gentleman imminently. He seems a conscientious sort of man, and I doubt not will prove a valuable acquaintance.
Well, if he's prepared to make the girls any amends, I, for one, shall not be the person to disagree with him.
Although it is difficult to guess in what way he can make us the amends he thinks are due. The wish is certainly to his credit. There is something very pompous in his style. Can he be a sensible man, sir?
No, my dear, I think not. Indeed, I have great hopes of finding him quite the reverse.
It is a pity our cousin will not be in regimentals. I think a man is nothing without regimentals. Who wants to be visited by a dull clergyman?
Mr. Collins, may I present Mrs. Bennet and my daughters? Would you like to come and join us?
Certainly. Oh, thank you very much. Oh. Mrs. Bennet, dear sir, I must compliment you on having so fine a family of daughters. I have heard much of their beauty, but in this instance, fame has fallen short of the truth. I have no doubt of your seeing them all disposed of in marriage in due course.
You are very kind, sir, I am sure, and I wish with all my heart it may prove so, or else it will be destitute things are settled so oddly.
Ahem. You allude, I take it, to the entail of this estate.
Aye, sir, I do indeed. It is a grievous affair for my poor girls, you must confess. Not that I mean to find fault with you, for I know such things are all chance in this world.
I am aware of the hardship to my fair cousins, and I can assure the young ladies that I come prepared to admire them. Perhaps it would
You
be...
seem very fortunate in your patroness.
Oh, yes, indeed, sir, indeed. My patroness, young ladies, is Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and a more attentive and considerate patroness I could not have found. I have never in all my life witnessed such affability and condescension.
Does she live near you, sir?
The garden in which stands my humble abode is separated only by a lane from Rosings Park, her ladyship's residence.
I think you said she was a widow, sir. Has she any family?
She has one daughter, the heiress of Rosings, and a very extensive property.
Then she is better off than many girls. And what sort of young lady is she? Is she handsome? Has she been presented at court?
Her poor health unhappily prevents her from being in town, and by that, as I told Lady Catherine myself one day, she has deprived the British court of its brightest ornament. You may imagine, sir, that I am always happy to offer those little delicate compliments which are always acceptable to ladies.
It is happy for you that you possess the talent of flattering with delicacy. May I ask if these attentions proceed from the impulse of the moment, or are they the result of previous study?
Well, they arise chiefly from what is passing at the time, and though I sometimes like to amuse myself by composing such elegant compliments as may be adapted to ordinary occasions, I always wish to give them as unstudied an air as possible.
I shall walk to Meryton tomorrow to ask when Denny comes back from town.
Lydia, Mr. Collins is talking.
Indeed, there is no offence. I bear my cousin no ill will. Mr. Bennet, I would be honoured to be your antagonist in a game of backgammon.
Backgammon?
arrangements here are most comfortable. I could almost fancy myself back at my humble parsonage house.
You must be sadly in want of a mistress for your home. A woman's touch makes all the difference, you know.
Ah, yes, well, Lady Catherine has been so kind in furnishing it that I should hardly think the parsonage to be wanting in that regard, although she herself has condescended to advise me, to increase my home comforts, you understand, to marry as soon as I can. It had occurred to me that it might be the means of my making amends to your most amiable daughters if I could find a mistress for my humble abode here at Longbourn.
I'm sure any of my daughters would be delighted were such an offer to be made. I must just mention, however, that my eldest daughter is likely to be soon engaged.
Ah.
But as to my younger girls, well, in their case, I know of no previous attachments whatsoever. Oh, girls, you must take Mr. Collins with you on your walk to Meryton to see my sister Phillips. I am sure he would wish to go.
Indeed I would. Cousin Elizabeth, I must beg of you to show me the way.
Poor Lizzie.
Do you often walk to Meryton, Cousin Elizabeth?
Perhaps once a week, although Kitty and Lydia go more often. They are most eager for the sort of interest and excitement that Longbourn is little able to furnish.
I trust in time they will acquire the steadiness and grace of their older sister, which indeed is much to be admired.
Oh, look, it's Denny! Denny!
Good day to you all. Ladies, may I beg permission to introduce my friend to you. This is Mr. Wickham. Wickham, may I introduce Miss Bennet and the Miss Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia Bennet.
We are very pleased to meet you, sir. May we introduce our cousin, Mr. Collins?
Good day, sir. Well, ladies, I am happy to say that my friend here has decided to accept a commission in our corps. My fellow officers and I must now look forward to being continually outdone by him in all things.
Denny, you'll give these young ladies quite the wrong impression of me, but certainly I look forward to being of use.
Oh, Jane, look, it's Mr. Bingley.
And his awful friend.
Miss Bennet. Miss Elizabeth. It is a pleasure to see you again. I am afraid, however, that my friend reports some urgent business he must attend to. But perhaps I can accompany you on your walk. Do you go far?
We are to call on our aunt. I'm sure she would be delighted to meet you, sir.
Sir, I was most interested to hear your compliments last night on the propriety of compliments. It put me greatly in the mind of a passage from Fordyce's sermons. You must know them.
Yes, of course. Yes, do remind me of the particular section.
I've heard much from my fellow officers about the friendliness of Mr. Bingley. He's already a firm favourite amongst them. Is Netherfield far from Meryton?
Not far at all, sir. Not above a few miles.
Has Mr. Darcy been staying there long?
About a month. He is a man of a very large property in Derbyshire, I understand.
Yes, his estate there is a noble one. You could not have met someone more capable of giving you information on that head than myself, for I have been connected with his family since my infancy. You may well be surprised, Miss Bennet, after seeing, as I believe you did, the very cold manner of our meeting just now.
Yes, I confess I did.
Are you much acquainted with Mr. Darcy?
Oh, as much as I ever wish to be. I have just spent the past 4 days in the same house with him, and I find him very disagreeable.
I've known him too long and too well to be a fair judge, but I believe your opinion would in general astonish.
Oh, but he's not at all liked in Hertfordshire. Everybody is disgusted with his pride. You will not find him favourably spoken of by anyone, I believe, except perhaps his intimate friends.
I wonder. Do you know whether he's likely to be in this country much longer?
I had not heard of him going away, but I do hope your plans will not be affected by his being here.
No, it is not for me to be driven away by Mr. Darcy. We're not on friendly terms, but I have no reason for avoiding him other than a sense of very great ill usage. His father was my godfather, and one of the best men that ever breathed. This Mr. Darcy's behaviour towards myself has been scandalous, but I believe I could forgive him anything had he not disappointed the hopes and disgraced the memory of his father.
I should not have thought Mr. Darcy capable of that.
A military life is not what I was intended for, Miss Bennet. I was brought up for the church, and should at this time have been in possession of a most valuable living had it pleased Mr. Darcy to allow it. His father bequeathed it to me when he died. But when the living fell vacant, it was given elsewhere.
Well, how could that be? How could Mr. Darcy disregard his father's will in such a manner?
Well, certain it is that the living became vacant 2 years ago, and that it was given to another man.
Well, this is quite shocking. What can have induced Mr. Darcy to behave so cruelly?
A thorough, determined dislike of me. A dislike which I must attribute in some measure to jealousy. Had the late Mr. Darcy liked me less, then his son may have borne with me better.
I had not thought Mr. Darcy so bad as this. But I do remember hearing him once boasting in Netherfield that he had an unforgiving temper. And yet I wonder that the very pride of Mr. Darcy has not made him just to you. Surely he should be too proud to be so dishonest.
It is wonderful, for almost all his actions may be traced to pride. Pride of family and position have often led him to be liberal and generous. Oh, he also has brotherly pride, which has made him a very kind and careful guardian of his sister.
What sort of girl is Miss Darcy?
As a child, she was affectionate and extremely fond of me, but she has grown up too much like her brother. Very, very proud.
I confess, I am astonished at the intimacy of Mr. Darcy with Mr. Bingley. How can Mr. Bingley, who seems good humour itself, be friends with such a man? He cannot know what Mr. Darcy is.
Probably not. But Mr. Darcy may please where he chooses. Amongst those he considers his equals, he is a very different man. But I mustn't run on in this manner. The past is the past, and I must look to the future. I believe I shall be very well satisfied at Meryton.
Yes, I hope you will, sir.
Lizzie, Kitty and Lydia have taken the others to call Mrs. Forster the Colonel's wife, as our aunt is not at home. Would you care to join them?
I suppose we ought to. I imagine Mr. Collins would not wish to stay long in any case.
I'm afraid I must bid you farewell. My sister will want my help for the invitations to our ball are being sent out today. Mr. Wickham, we are issuing a general invitation to the officers, and I do hope you'll be able to be one of the party.
Would be delighted, sir. I must say goodbye too. I hope to meet you all again soon.
I am astonished. It is surely impossible. But how could Mr. Wickham be mistaken? Surely Mr. Darcy's most intimate friends cannot be that deceived in him.
I can more easily believe that Mr. Bingley has been deceived in his friend than that Mr. Wickham should invent such a history. If it be not so, let Mr. Darcy contradict it. Besides, there was truth in all his looks.
It is difficult indeed. It is distressing. One does not know what to think.
I beg your pardon, one knows exactly what to think.
Girls! A servant from Netherfield has just called with our invitation to the ball. What a fine thing!
Are you going to dance this time, Mary? You can't go on avoiding it.
While I think it no sacrifice to join occasional evening engagements, I do not see why I should be prevailed upon to dance. I would much prefer to play for you.
And what about you, Mr. Collins? Do you intend to accept Miss Bingley's invitation? Would it be proper for you to join in the evening's amusements which your bishop approved?
I am hardly of the opinion that a ball of this kind, given by a respectable young man, can have any evil tendency. And I am so far from objecting to dancing myself that I hope I shall be honoured by the hands of all my fair cousins in the course of the evening. And may I take this opportunity of soliciting yours, Miss Elizabeth, for the first two dances especially.
Oh, yes, of course, Mr. Collins. Oh, Lizzie. happier in her dancing partner than you were in yours.
Well, I am very happy for her, Charlotte. She's very much in love.
Well, then she should leave in no doubt of her feelings. It is clear that he likes Jane, of course, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on.
Oh, but she does help him on, as much as her nature will allow. If I can perceive her regard for him, he must be a simpleton indeed not to discover it too.
Remember, he does not know Jane's disposition as well as you do. There will always be times when he will know that he might like her, and it is important that she should make the most of every half hour in which she can command his attention.
Your plan is a good one, where nothing is intended but the desire of being well married.
Well,
So those are not Jane's feelings. She is not acting by design.
I wish her every success. Happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance, you know. Well, there will always be vexations and grief. It is best to know as little as possible in advance of the defects of the person with whom you are to pass your life.
You know that argument is not sound. You would never act in that way yourself.
Miss Bennet, my friend Wickham asked me to convey his apologies to you in particular. He's been obliged to go to town on business. However, I doubt very much that his business would have called him away just now if he had not wished to avoid a certain gentleman here.
Denny, you promised to dance with me. Do come along.
There, Charlotte, you see? It is as I told you. Mr. Darcy has greatly wronged Mr. Wickham, and now he has been forced to stay away from Netherfield because of him.
Are you so sure that Mr. Wickham's word is to be trusted?
How could it not be? He gave me all the details without reservation. And for myself, I know that Mr. Darcy is unforgiving, resentful, proud.
Bennett, I wondered if you would do me the honour of dancing the next with me.
Why, I do not... I have not... Thank you. Yes. Oh, why could I not think of an excuse? Hateful man, I swore I would never dance with him.
I dare say you will find him very agreeable.
Heaven forbid. That is the greatest misfortune of all, to find a man agreeable whom one is determined to hate.
Lizzie, do not be a simpleton. Do not allow your fancy for Wickham make you seem unpleasant in the eyes of a man 10 times his consequence.
We are a small number of couples to be standing up, but sometimes smaller groups allow for more graceful dancing.
I believe it is sometimes pleasanter for all. Yes.
It is your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy. I talked about the dance. You ought to make some sort of remark about the size of the room, or the music, perhaps.
I'm happy to say whatever you wish.
Very well. Well, that reply will do for the present. Perhaps by and by I may observe that private balls are much pleasanter than public ones.
Do you talk by rule then, when you are dancing?
Sometimes. One ought to speak a little, you know. And yet, for the advantage of some, conversation ought to be arranged, so that they may have the trouble of saying as little as possible.
Are you consulting your own feelings in the present case? Do you seek to gratify mine?
Both, I imagine. We are each of an unsocial, taciturn disposition, unwilling to speak unless we expect to say something that will amaze the whole room.
It's no very striking resemblance of your own character, I am sure. Your sisters often walk to Meryton.
Yes, quite often. When you saw us there the other day, we had just been forming a new acquaintance.
Mr. Wickham is blessed with such happy manners as may ensure his making friends easily. Whether he is equally capable of keeping them is less certain.
He has been so unlucky as to lose your friendship, and in a manner which he is likely to suffer from all his life. I remember hearing you say once, Mr. Darcy, that you hardly ever forgave, that your resentment, once created, was unappeasable. You are very careful, I suppose, as to its being created.
I am.
And never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice.
I hope not. ask us to what these questions tend, Miss Bennet?
Merely as to the illustration of your character. I'm trying to make it out.
What is your success?
I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as to puzzle me exceedingly.
I'd ask Miss Bennet that you would not attempt to sketch my character at the present moment. There's reason to fear the performance would do no credit on either party.
If I do not take your likeness now, I may never have another opportunity.
And by no means suspend any pleasure of yours.
Miss Eliza, I hear you are quite delighted with George Wickham, but I find the young man quite forgot to tell you that he is merely the son of old Wickham, the late Mr. Darcy's steward. So let me advise you as a friend not to believe all his assertions. Wickham has treated Mr. Darcy in a most infamous manner. I pity you, Miss Eliza, for the discovery of your favourite's guilt, but really, considering his descent, one could not expect much better.
His guilt and his descent appear by your account to be the same. For I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than being the son of Mr. Darcy's steward, and I can assure you he informed me of that himself.
I beg your pardon. Excuse my interference. It was kindly meant.
Jane, I want to know what you've learned of Mr. Wickham. Or perhaps you have been too pleasantly engaged to think of any third person.
No, indeed, I have not forgotten. But I have nothing satisfactory to tell you. Mr. Bingley does not know the circumstances. But he will vouch for the honour of his friend. He says that he fears that Mr. Wickham is by no means a respectable young man.
Does Mr. Bingley know Mr. Wickham himself?
No. He had not met him until the other morning at Farrington.
This account, then, is one he has learned from Mr. Darcy. I am satisfied. I do not doubt Mr. Bingley's sincerity, but you must excuse my not being convinced. I shall venture to think of both gentlemen as I did before.
Just before we go into supper, some music would be delightful. Caroline, could you go us to the... Ah, Miss Mary Bennet. How very good of you.
I have just heard that there is now in the room a near relation of my patroness. I happened to overhear the gentleman himself, Mr. Darcy, mention his cousin, Mr. Bourg, and his aunt, Lady Catherine. As you know, Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bourg are intended to marry, to unite the two family fortunes. I am so thankful that this discovery is made in time for me to pay my respects to him, which I am now going to do, and I trust he will excuse my not having done so before.
You are not going to introduce yourself to Mr. Darcy?
Indeed I am. It will be in my power to assure him that her ladyship was quite well not 1 week ago.
Of course, we expect an announcement any day now. Mr. Bingley is such a charming young man and so taken with Jane. And what a fine thing this will be for her sisters, since naturally it will throw them in the way of other rich men. Oh, my dear friend, I do hope that you might soon also know the satisfaction of seeing a daughter well married. It is such a comfort.
Oh, Lydia!
Miss Bennet! Goodness gracious, Miss Bennet, come here! Lydia, listen.
That will do extremely well, child. You have delighted us long enough. Let the other young ladies have time to exhibit.
I believe supper is ready next door. Do let us go through.
If I was so fortunate as to be able to sing, I should be delighted, I'm sure, in obliging the company with an air, for I believe music to be a very innocent diversion and perfectly compatible with the profession of a clergyman. I do not mean, however, that we can be justified in devoting too much of our time to music, for certainly the rector of a... Oh.
Jane, are you quite well?
This is from Caroline Bingley. What it contains has surprised me a great deal. The whole party will be on their way from Netherfield now, and on their way to town, and without any intention of ever coming back.
No, I am sure they will soon return.
Caroline states quite decidedly that none of the party will return to Hertfordshire this winter. She says that Mr. Bingley has some business to attend to
Mr. Darcy is impatient to see his sister, and to confess the truth, Charles and I are also eager to see her again. I really do not think Georgiana Darcy has her equal, and the affection she inspires in me is heightened only by my hope of her being hereafter my sister. My brother admires her greatly, and Mr. Darcy wishes the connection quite as much as I do. Am I wrong, my dearest Jane, in indulging the hope of an event which will secure the happiness of so many?
Is it not clear enough, Lizzie? Does it not expressly state that Caroline neither expects nor wishes me to be her sister, and that she is convinced of her brother's indifference? Can there be any other opinion on the subject?
Yes, there can. But mine is very different. Will you hear it?
Most willingly.
Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you, but she wants him to marry Miss Darcy. Oh, Jane, you ought to believe me. No one who has seen you and Bingley together can doubt his affection for you. Miss Bingley, I am sure, cannot. Could she see half as much love for herself in Mr. Darcy, she would have ordered her wedding clothes already. Jane, the case is this. We are not rich enough or grand enough for them. But you cannot seriously imagine that Miss Bingley will be able to persuade her brother that rather than being in love with you, he is in fact in love with her friend.
I do believe Caroline incapable of willfully deceiving anyone. All that it can hope in this case is that she has deceived herself.
Believe her to be deceived by all means, but also believe that Mr. Bingley will soon return, and he will be as much in love with you as ever when he does.
May I hope, Cousin Elizabeth, to solicit the honour of a private audience with you?
I'm sure Lizzie would be very happy. I'm sure she would have no objection. None, Jane. I want you to say.
I beg you, madam, please do not go. Mr. Collins must excuse me. He can have nothing to say that anybody need not hear. I am going away myself.
No, nonsense. I desire you to stay where you are. Lizzie, I insist upon you staying and hearing Mr. Collins. Come, Jane.
Believe me, Cousin Elizabeth, that your modesty, far from doing you any disservice, rather adds to your other perfections. Almost as soon as I entered this house, I singled you out as the companion for my future life. But before I run away with my feelings, perhaps it would be advisable for me to state my reasons for marrying. My reasons for marrying are, firstly, that I believe it is the duty of every clergyman to set the example of matrimony. Secondly, that I believe it will add greatly to my happiness. And thirdly, which perhaps I ought to have mentioned first, that it is the particular advice and recommendation of my noble patroness. Mr. Collins, she said, Mr. Collins, you must marry. Choose a gentlewoman for my sake and your own, and let her be an active, useful sort of person. Thus much for my general intention in favour of matrimony. Now, nothing remains but for me to assure you, in the most animated language, of the violence of my affection. To fortune I am perfectly indifferent. I am well aware that £1,000 after your father's death is all you may ever be entitled to. You may assure yourself that no ungenerous approach shall ever pass my lips on that subject when we are married.
You are too hasty, sir. You forget I have made no answer. Let me do so at once. Accept my thanks for the compliment you are paying me. I am very sensible to the honour of your proposals, but it is impossible for me to do otherwise than to decline them.
I am aware that it is usual for young ladies to reject the addresses of the man whom they secretly mean to accept. I am therefore by no means discouraged by what you have just said, and shall hope to lead you to the altar ere long.
Upon my word, sir, your hope is a rather extraordinary one. I am perfectly serious in my refusal. You could not make me happy, and I am perfectly convinced by it that I am the last woman in the world who could make you so.
But you must give me leave to flatter myself, my dear cousin. It does not appear to me that my hand is unworthy of your acceptance. You should also consider that, in spite of your manifold attractions, it is by no means certain that another offer of marriage may be made to you. I shall therefore choose to attribute your rejection to your wish of increasing my love by suspense, according to the usual practice of elegant females.
I assure you, sir, I have no pretensions to the kind of elegance which consists in tormenting a respectable man. I thank you again and again for the honour you have done me in your proposals, but to accept them is absolutely impossible. My feelings in every respect forbid it. Can I speak plainer?
You are uniformly charming, and I am persuaded that when sanctioned by the authority of both your excellent parents, my proposals will not fail to be acceptable.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, you are wanted immediately. You must make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins, for she vows she will not have him, and if you do not make haste, he will change his mind and he will not have her.
I have not the pleasure of understanding you. Of what are you talking?
Of Mr. Collins and Lizzie. Lizzie declares she will not have Mr. Collins, and if we do not hurry, Mr. Collins will begin to say that he will not have Lizzie.
And what should I do upon the occasion? It seems a hopeless business.
Speak to Lizzie yourself, of course. Tell her you insist upon her marrying him.
Oh, let her be called here. She shall hear my opinion.
Elizabeth, come here immediately.
Come here, child. Now, your mother tells me that Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage. Is this true?
Yes, father.
And this offer of marriage you have refused?
I have, sir.
Very well. We come now to the point. Your mother insists upon your accepting Mr. Collins. Is it not so, Mrs. Bennet?
Yes, or I will never see her again.
An unhappy alternative lies before you, Elizabeth. From this day you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
Mr. Bennet, what is the meaning of this? You know she must marry him. What will happen to us if she does not? When you die, we will all be destitute.
My dear, let us not give way to such gloomy thoughts. Let us hope for better things. Let us flatter ourselves that I might outlive you.
I cannot do it, Mamma. I am sorry, but I cannot. How did you not know what I would say? You should have steered him towards Mary. I believe she might have been more receptive.
I don't know what's to become of us all, really, I don't. I do not know who is to maintain you when your father is dead. I shall not be able to keep you. And so I warn you, I have done with you from this very day. I told you I should never speak to you again, and you'll find me as good as my word.
Oh, Charlotte, I'm glad you are come. There is such fun here. What do you think has happened? Mr. Collins has made an offer to Lizzie, and she will not have him.
Oh, my dear Miss Lucas, I beg you, please speak to your obstinate friend. I pray you will, because nobody is on my side. I am cruelly used. Nobody feels for my poor nerves.
Oh, I'm sorry for you indeed. Would it help if I was to invite Mr. Collins to dine with us today?
Oh, please do. He was unbearable even before he was refused, so now he will be well nigh intolerable.
My dear Miss Collins, that might indeed be the best solution. I shall speak to Elizabeth in his absence. I'm sure she will soon see sense.
I'm very happy to help.
Engaged to Mr. Collins. My dear Charlotte, that's impossible.
Why should you be so surprised, my dear Lizzie? What do you think it incredible that Mr. Collins could procure any woman's good opinion? Just because he was not so happy to succeed with you?
Of course not, but
I see what you're feeling. You must be surprised, very much surprised, so lately as Mr. Collins was wishing to marry you. But once you've had time to think it over, I hope you're satisfied with what I've done. Not romantic, you know, I never was. I ask only a comfortable home. Given Mr. Collins's character and situation in life, I'm convinced that my chances of happiness with him are as fair as most people can boast on a single marriage estate.
But can you really be content with such a man?
What else would you have me do, Lizzie? I cannot remain single to be a burden on my parents and younger siblings. It is my duty to find a situation for myself. Perhaps when you are older, you'll understand the need to do as I'm doing.
I'm sorry, Charlotte, of course. You must do as you think best. And I sincerely hope that you will be happy.
I shall depend on hearing from you very often. And I have a favour to ask. Will you come and visit me when I'm married? I understand I'm not likely to leave Kent for some time.
Of course I will, as long as you promise me a glimpse of the famous Rosings Park and Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
That, I think, you will be unable to avoid, even if you wish to.
Oh, but my dear mother had more command over herself. She cannot know the pain she causes me by her continually talking about Mr. Bingley. But I suppose it cannot last long. He will be forgotten, and we will all be as we were before. He may live in my memory as the most amiable man of my acquaintance, but that is all. I have nothing to hope or fear, and nothing to reproach him with. Do not worry, Lizzie, truly, for I will be well.
So, Lizzie, your sister is crossed in love, I find. I congratulate her. Next to being married, there is nothing a girl likes more than to be crossed in love now and then. When is your turn to come? You can hardly bear to be long outdone by Jane, and there are officers enough in Meryton to disappoint every girl in the country. Let Wickham be the man. He is a pleasant fellow and would jilt you creditably.
Thank you, Father, but a less agreeable man would satisfy me. We cannot well expect Jane's good fortune.
True, but it would be a comfort to know that if anything of that kind were to befall, you have an affectionate mother who will make the most.
I do not blame Jane, for Jane would have got Mr. Bingley if she could, but Lizzie... Oh, sister, it is very hard to think that she might have been Mr. Collins's wife by this time. He made her an offer in this very room, and she refused him. And now Lady Lucas will have a daughter married before I do, and Longbourn is just as much entailed as ever. The Lucases are very artful people indeed, sister. They are all for what they can... Oh, Lady Lucas, my dear friend, how are you?
Oh, poor Jane. It does seem likely to have been a good match for her, but these things happen so often. Young men such as you describe Mr. Bingley so easily fall in love with a pretty girl for a few weeks, and then when accident separates them, so easily forget her.
Oh, but we do not suffer from accidents. No. We suffer from the interference of friends and family, who can persuade a young man to think no more of a girl whom he was violently in love with only a few days earlier.
Oh, better for it to have been you, Lizzie. You would have laughed yourself out of it sooner. Now, would Jane like to come back with us to London? A change of scene may be beneficial, and you would be going to Kent, will you not? Oh, but I do hope, however, she would not be hoping to see this young man if she came. We live in such a different part of town that the chances of them meeting would be improbable unless he came to see her.
And that is quite impossible, for his sister and Mr. Darcy will never suffer him to call upon Jane in such a part of London.
So much the better, Lizzie. Now, listen, I wish to speak with you seriously. I have nothing to say against Mr. Wickham. Indeed, he is a very charming man, especially coming as he does from my own county of Derbyshire, and if he had the fortune he ought to have, then I should think he could do no better. But as things stand, you must not let your fancy run away with you. You have sense, and we expect you to use it.
Aunt, this is being serious indeed.
Yes, and I wish to engage you to be serious likewise.
And I am not in love with Mr. Wickham, although he is beyond all comparison the most agreeable man I ever saw. So yes, I do see the imprudence of encouraging a deeper attachment on either side. I promise you that I will do what I think to be wisest. And now I hope you are satisfied.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Well, Cousin Elizabeth, who would have imagined that we should have received an invitation to dine at Rosings Park so immediately upon your arrival? Why, you haven't even unpacked yet.
I assure you I feel all the honour of it.
Do not make yourself uneasy, dear cousin, about your apparel. Lady Catherine is far from requiring that elegance of dress in us which so becomes herself and her daughter. She likes to have the distinction of rank preserved.
Your friend seems to be a very genteel, pretty kind of girl, Mrs. Collins. You play and sing, Miss Bennet?
A little.
Oh, well, sometime or other we shall be happy to hear you. Our instrument is a capital one, probably superior to any. Well, you shall try it. Do your sisters play and sing?
One of them does.
Why did you not all learn? You ought all to have learned. Your mother should have taken you to town every spring for the benefit of masters.
My mother would have been pleased to, but my father hates London.
Has your governess left you?
We never had a governess.
No governess? How can such a thing be possible? 5 daughters brought up at home without a governess? I never heard of such a thing. Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education.
I do not believe that was the case, ma'am.
Are any of your younger sisters out, Miss Bennet?
Yes, ma'am, all of them.
All? What? All 5 out at once? The younger out before the elder are married? Your younger sisters must be very young.
Yes, my youngest is not 16. Perhaps she is young to be much in company. But really, ma'am, I think it would be very hard on younger sisters not to have their fair share of society and amusement, simply because their elder may not have the means or inclination to marry. It would not promote sisterly affection.
Upon my word, you give your opinion very decidedly for so young a person. Pray, what is your age?
With 3 younger sisters grown up, your ladyship can hardly expect me to own it.
Ah, Darcy, come in. You know Mr. and Mrs. Collins, of course, and this is their guest, Miss Elizabeth Bennet. Miss Bennet, my nephew, Mr. Darcy.
Had the pleasure of being introduced to Miss Bennet in Hertfordshire, Aunt.
Indeed.
Mr. Darcy, this is a surprise. Miss Collins did not tell me you were visiting.
I come every year at this time. Your family well, Miss Bennet?
Yes, quite well. My elder sister has lately been in London. Have you never happened to see her there?
No. No, I was not so fortunate as to meet Miss Bennet.
Miss Bennet, let us hear you play now. I insist. There are few people in England, I suppose, with a more true enjoyment of music than myself. If I had ever learnt, I should have been a great proficient. And so would Anne, had her health allowed. How does Georgiana get?
Though she'll never believe it when I tell her so.
something to frighten me, Mr. Darcy. They're coming in all this state to hear me. I will not be alarmed. My courage always rises at every attempt to intimidate me.
I will not say you are mistaken. I know you find great enjoyment in professing opinions which are not, in fact, your own.
It is very ungenerous in you, Mr. Darcy, to mention something that you knew to my disadvantage in Hertfordshire. Very impolitic, too. It provokes me to retaliate, and to say such things as will shock your relations.
I am not afraid of you, Miss Bennet.
Shall I tell your aunt, then, that the very first time I saw you was at a ball, where you danced not one dance, so gentlemen were scarce, and to my certain knowledge there was more than one young lady in want of a partner.
I had not at that time the honour of knowing any lady in the assembly beyond my own party.
True. And of course nobody can ever be introduced in a ballroom.
Perhaps I should have sought an introduction. But I am ill qualified to recommend myself to strangers.
It seems strange to me, Mr. Darcy, that a man of sense and education, who has lived in the world, can be ill qualified to recommend himself to strangers.
I've not a talent which some people possess, being able to converse easily with those I have never met before.
I cannot play the pianoforte in the same masterly manner that I have seen so many other women do. But I've always presumed that to be my own fault, because I do not take the trouble of practicing.
You're perfectly right. We, neither of us, perform well to strangers.
Darcy?
Bennet. I apologise for the intrusion. I had understood that Mrs. Collins was here.
She has gone into town on business. Please, do sit down.
I should leave. I had only meant to give my aunt's greetings to Mrs. Collins while I was passing. Please, would you be so kind as to convey these? Good day, Miss Bennet. Miss Bennet.
Mr. Darcy.
Very nice, brother. Will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. Declaring myself thus, I am fully aware that I am going against the wishes of my family, my friends, and indeed my own better judgment. The relative situation of our families is such that any marriage between us must be regarded as highly reprehensible. Indeed, I regard it as such myself, but cannot be helped. I have come to feel for you a passion, admiration, and regard which has overcome every rational objection, and I beg you to relieve my suffering and to consent to be my wife.
In such cases as these, it is, I believe, the established mode to express a sense of obligation. But I cannot. I have never desired your good opinion, and you have certainly bestowed it most unwillingly. I am sorry to have occasioned pain to anyone. It was most unconsciously done, however, and I hope will be of short duration.
Is this all the reply I am to have the honour of expecting? I might wish to be informed why, with so little endeavour at civility, I am thus rejected.
And I might as well inquire why, with so evident a desire of offending and insulting me, you chose to tell me that you liked me against your will, against your reason, and even against your character. Was not this an excuse for incivility if I was uncivil? But I have other reasons. You know I have.
Do you really think that any consideration could tempt me to accept the man who has been the means of ruining, perhaps forever, the happiness of a most beloved sister? Can you deny that you've done it, that you parted them?
I have no wish to deny that I did everything in my power to separate my friend from your sister, or that I rejoice in my success. Towards him I have been kinder than towards myself.
And it is not merely this on which my dislike is founded. My opinion of you was decided when I first heard Mr. Wickham's account of your dealings with him. On this subject, what can you have to say?
You take an eager interest in this gentleman's concerns.
Who that knows what his misfortunes have been can help feeling an interest in him.
His misfortunes, yes, his misfortunes have been great indeed.
And of your infliction. You have reduced him to his present state of poverty, and yet you treat the mention of his misfortune with contempt and ridicule.
This is your opinion of him. My faults, according to this calculation, are heavy indeed. Perhaps his offences might have been overlooked had not your pride been hurt by my honest confession of the scruples that had at first prevented me forming any serious design on it. The disguise of every sort is my abhorrence. Could you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your connections? To congratulate myself on the hope of relations whose condition in life is so decidedly beneath my own?
You are mistaken, Mr. Darcy. The mode of your declaration merely spared me the concern which I might have felt in refusing you had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner. You could not have made the offer of your hand in any possible way that would have tempted me to accept it. From the very beginning of our acquaintance, your manners impressed me with the fullest belief of your arrogance, your conceit, and your selfish disdain for the feelings of others. I had not known you a month before I knew that you were the last man in the world whom I could ever marry.
You've said quite enough, madam. I perfectly comprehend your feelings. But now I need to be ashamed of what my own have been. Forgive me, having taken up so much of your time, and accept my best wishes for your health and happiness.